My name is Avinash, and I am a part of the practice team at Palladian. Thanks a lot for taking the time out and making it to this webinar. Rest assured, there will be some kind of positive input you'll be able to take out of this. We will be starting in a few minutes. Kindly bear with us. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience. We will start now. Um, so, a couple of days back, I actually met one of a CISO friend of mine, and he was saying that he's having a lot of hair loss issues. So I was just telling him, maybe you should go see someone, maybe see how things work out. He said, no, man, nothing's working out because I know that my hair loss is because of my worrying about my data loss, and even Dr. Batra cannot do anything about it. On that note, welcome to Palladian's webinar on devising effective strategies to protect your data. As part of this webinar, we will cover what are the best ways to go about in protecting your data, what are the technical components which will help you devise a strong data protection strategy. So, firstly, to understand what is the data threat landscape today, what are all the possible points from which your data can actually go out. So, people, there are a lot of concepts around bring your own devices. There is a concept around people syncing up their mobile phones with their accounts to be online 24/7. So, there is a genuine possibility of a loss of theft of either laptops or mobile devices and the data along with it, unless and until there is some kind of a control on, or rather on an authorized transfer of data to any USB device, that would be a significant risk. More importantly, given the volume of documentation which is created by any organization, it is very difficult to pinpoint where my sensitive data is located and what do I do to protect it. Malicious insider intent cannot be ruled out, as a result of which a lot of confidential data is stolen out by insiders. There are some stats to back it. I'll come to them in a while. Things like taking photographs of sensitive data, printing when everybody has got access, and copying data is a significant risk. If somebody is not aware as to how sensitive information, if by mistake, has hit their inboxes or their machines, and what do they need to do to go about sending it in the right way, of who's the authorized users, and understanding what should be the typical flags they should be raising on, that is a significant data risk. And lastly, if the sensitive files are not protected, even if you have identified that the information in this document is sensitive, but you have not made mechanisms for authorized users to access them, that is a significant data risk again. So just some stats which have been covered over a point of time. If you see, the kind of incidents in terms of over a period of time has significantly risen from when people have thought they have controls in place. There seems to be a kind of a sine wave scenario where it hits a peak, it comes down again and then goes up again. And more often than not, the breach type which is being covered, things like stolen document, viruses, because we have a lot of either physical controls or technical controls to take small things into account. But in terms of somebody actually actively looking to get into your environment, understand and locate your critical information, and without your knowledge, exfiltrating that critical information out of your specific environment is one of the greatest reasons of data breaches happening all over time. A technical control or a physical safety measure can still be done, but there are some things we know that we know. There are some things we know that we don't know. But the biggest risk comes when there are things that we don't know that we don't know. Going ahead, a couple of more stats. If you see, most of the incident vectors are coming in from outside, while the inside vectors cannot be ruled out as well. In terms of the incidents involving third parties, even if third parties are involved, there is a certain incident, but a lot of incidents are happening without the third parties, as high as 88%. And the leading indicator one should draw from this kind of a report is that somebody is getting into your network. Either the information is going out voluntarily or involuntarily. End of the day, the network or the data within the network is what is being compromised. Having said that, why would an organization want to look into a data protection program or devise an effective data protection strategy? Irrespective of the kind of organization you are, whether you are in e-commerce, whether you are in the IT space, whether you are in the engineering space, and naturally, if you are in the BFSI space, the volumes of data being created are humongous, and they are spread across different types of file structuring. It could be, a standard an FTP server where people are putting information. It could be sample documentation. It could be a database in which somebody is writing in information one way or the other. So in a nutshell, all organizations are creating heavy volumes of data, which is more often than not unstructured. As a flip side of this, since the data is so unstructured and not really from an ownership perspective, people are able to access it. The biggest challenge is in identifying where the data lies and how it should be handled. Now, again, if you see, all of these are interlinked one way or the other. If there is, an inappropriately configured or a totally absent data handling procedure, then people, either with intent or without intent, do not know what needs to be done with that information, and you are providing an open door for that information to go out of your organization, and the number of sources from which it can go out is so many. Having said that, you cannot put all controls only at the at the perimeter level or at the technical level. The data protection, the core of a data protection strategy is to understand that it is a particular user within the organization who's creating this information, and the user needs to understand that, with the right intent, this document has to be protected, and there is some level of ownership at my end as an end user, as the creator of this information, to ensure that the document is protected in the way it should be. Now, the protection, like I said, there are multiple ways in which you can leak this information out. Whatever your data protection strategy is, it should ensure that it is covering your protection across all channels, wherever the data is going, and from all possible sources like people, process, technology, and IT. Now, the other thing is, a lot of people feel that having some sort of a forensics or an analysis solution, which may or may not be something like an SIEM, fixes most things. Agreed, an SIEM, if configured correctly, would definitely report a data breach, but it is like locking the stable door after the horse has run, right? So a technical control like an SIEM will only give you an understanding of what happened and what the root cause was it, but it will not help you block it. So what are the benefits of having an effective data protection program? There's a clear-cut transparency when you have a defined procedure of the who, what, when, and where of data creation, and the cycle which the data itself is going through can be monitored. Now, any person, even if he is a new user to the organization, if given the document like a data register or a security controls matrix, can clearly understand, am I the right person who's the recipient or user of this information? If yes, what am I authorized to do, and what am I not authorized to do, what I shouldn't be doing? And if I need to send it, who should I be sending it to, and what should be the procedure around that? So the headache anybody will have from somebody who's owning the whole IT process in terms of whether my data leak is going out or whether it is getting disclosed without somebody's information is significantly reduced. I will just come to the components of a good data protection strategy, and if you see, each of these components themselves drive user-driven compliance. Again, you are going to safeguard your data flowing across all channels and across all things like people, process, tech, and IT. And most of these solutions have an inbuilt capability of detecting a possible incident or a possible data breach when it is happening, and can look at remediation rather than just reporting. You can integrate it with your eventual ecosystem and ensure that even the attempts at an incident happening or a possible data breach are reported. So you are blocking the incident and at the same time reporting it. So you have the best of both worlds. Typical components around a data protection strategy is having a data classification solution, which will help you identify where your critical information is and embed some kind of metadata and labeling, which will help people both from a technology perspective and from a user perspective to understand what this information is all about. A data leak prevention solution, which will then look at blocking things as and when they are happening. A digital rights management solution, which will again help define some kind of policies and documents leaving your organization. And the most important part is understanding that none of these is an island. They cannot work in silos effectively. A tight integration between each of these three components forms the crux or the core of an effective data protection strategy. Before we proceed further, I would like to pass on the ball to the specific OEM experts we have on this panel. Passing it to Simon Carlson at the moment, who will take you through the nuances of data classification. Over to you, Simon.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Avinash, for that introduction. So, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can all see my screen now, which should have the data classification page up there. So, just as a little bit of an introduction to myself, so as Avinash said, my name is Simon Carlson. I'm the pre-sales lead for TITUS in the APAC region, and as some of you will be aware, TITUS is an organization that specializes in the data classification part of the data protection strategies that Avinash was just outlining, and we work closely with both Palladium and Raytheon WebSense to implement classification controls and DLP controls to help organizations protect their data. So specifically though, this afternoon I'm going to talk about the data classification part of that strategy. You know, what is data classification? Why do organizations need classification? And what are some of the things that organizations need to consider before they embark on a classification journey? So I think we all accept that organizations around the globe now are spending huge amounts of money on data protection strategies, but they're still struggling to keep their data safe. And we're not just talking about protection from hackers or malicious insiders, but we're also talking about unintentional loss from broken or poor business processes, or even just accidental data loss from users accidentally replying all to an email and finding that they've got some external recipients on there and that they've accidentally sent them some sensitive information. So, if Edward Snowden managed to walk off with highly sensitive information from one of the world's best protected organizations, you can understand why this still remains a challenge for enterprise organizations today in terms of having effective data protection strategies in place. So why are organizations struggling to keep their data safe? So I think the answer to that lies in our need to share information in order to do business, and it's in trying to find the balance between the need to share information effectively across the organization for collaboration purposes and the need to protect that information. As we see organizations mature and change to become a lot more collaborative in the way that they work, it's becoming more important for them to be able to share information quickly across the workplace. And as organizations change from command and control structures to be more collaborative, we are seeing that users have got access to more and more sensitive information, and that in turn leads to a higher risk of data loss to the organization. So there is a need to collaborate and share information, but at the same time we need to make sure that information is protected. And the other trend that we see, particularly across the APAC region, is that there is more and more regulatory and compliance being introduced. A lot of countries in our region now have very specific privacy laws and privacy regulations, and also within individual market sectors like the financial sector, healthcare, telecommunications are all becoming subject to greater compliance demands, which is really driving the need to be able to identify and classify information in order to meet those regulatory and compliance needs. So when you couple all those things together, the need to share information but the need to protect it, and this greater demand for compliance and regulatory information, all this really is driving the need for organizations to reevaluate their approach to data security, and one that strikes a balance between protecting information and collaborating and sharing that information. So, what is the solution to these problems? So, one approach really is to look at data classification. To find the balance between sharing information and protecting information, you really need to classify your data in order to understand two things. What do I need to protect? So what data do I have and what is its sensitivity level? And also think about the value that that data has to the organization. What would be the consequences if that data were to leak outside of my organization? So, classification can really address those two things. What information do I have? So what do I need to protect? And what is the value of that information to my organization? And once you understand that and you've identified your data, then you can enforce the appropriate levels of control by using other technologies like DLP that Mahesh will talk about a little bit later on in today's webinar, but you can put those controls in place to actually protect that information. Enterprises are struggling to some extent to protect information because they just don't know what it is that they're trying to protect themselves from. So it's very difficult to implement controls if you're really not sure what information you're trying to stop from leaking outside of the organization and what information it's actually appropriate to share. And there are some instances where you'll want to enforce some very significant protection for sensitive information like healthcare records, for example, or customer information, credit card number, that type of information you may want to put very stringent controls around. However, there will also be situations where you want to enable sharing of data throughout the organization. So again, it's about striking that balance and understanding what's appropriate to share and what level of controls are required to protect information. So really the message here is, identifying sensitive information really is the first step to finding that balance between sharing and protecting information. But when we talk about classification, let's not just think about classification in terms of security, but classification can really be the foundation for delivering outcomes right across the organization. Of course, there are the immediate security outcomes that we can deliver by enhancing the value of other security technologies that you have already invested in, like data loss prevention, for example. But we can also enable encryption adoption. So you can use classification labels to then trigger policies that will apply RMS encryption to data. You can use classification labels to drive your archiving and data retention policies. And also, obviously, you can use the classification labels to show auditors that you are maintaining compliance and regulations. So don't just think of classification in terms of solving a security issue, but think of classification really as a foundation to driving business outcomes in all of those areas that are on the slide in front of you now. So how do we actually identify information? How do we classify information? So I guess as a very simple example, we've learned here from the FedExes of this world and the DHLs of this world, when they pick up a parcel, if the box was actually just completely blank, like the three in front of you, they would have no idea really whether the contents of that information was fragile or not. So they wouldn't really know how to handle that appropriately. So what the courier companies did was they applied visual markings to boxes. So they write the word fragile on there, and they quite often will have machine readable barcodes. And the point here is that fragile gives the person that's picking up that box a visual clue as to how to handle it. And the machine readable code is really the code that travels with that box no matter where it is, so that that level of classification can be automatically read and it can be handled appropriately. So we've taken really that same concept and we've applied that to files. So we can take those same visual markings and we can apply those to the files, and they can be in the form of watermarks, headers in the documents, footers in the documents. Those visual markings can take a number of different formats. But we can also embed metadata into files, because one of the really important things about classification is that the labels will travel wherever the data goes. So no matter where you've got users accessing the data, they can clearly see the markings, but also wherever it travels to in the network, upstream and downstream devices, such as DLP devices, backup and archive, encryption gateways, can always read that information. So it's important that those labels stay with the files. But essentially, we apply visual markings and we apply metadata to files. So, that really applies to desktop files, but the other area to think about is mobile, because obviously if you're classifying your information, at a desktop level, then what you really want to do is close the loop when the user moves, off-site and they're using their mobile to access emails and access documents. So, consider also sensitive information in terms of what your mobile protection strategy is. Here we can see a screenshot from an iOS device, so an Apple mobile device. And if a user was just to look at that list of emails there, it may not be that obvious to them, what the most sensitive one is there. You might look down the list and you might say, well, Mike Anderson's might be the most important there because, he has the exclamation mark next to his email. But really, the most important one there was the restricted one at the top there, because it's an email that's talking about acquisitions. And if we apply those same metadata tags to emails on a mobile device, you can immediately see there the visual markings that tell the user how to treat those emails appropriately. So don't only think about classification in terms of desktop, but also think about what your mobile strategy would be as well, and transferring those policies onto mobile devices for messaging and also documents on your mobile devices. So how do we actually classify information? So we can do it in a number of different ways. There is clearly an ability to automate classification. So no user intervention is required, and generally the IT people will define policies to say, if we see this information, then we're going to automatically apply a particular classification label. But the issue sometimes we find with automated classification is that it's really reliant upon the IT department to set up those policies. And for most enterprises today, IT should not be the guardian of data classification policies. It is not really for the IT department to tell the business what information is actually sensitive. So what we're seeing now really is a shift in accountability away from the IT department and move that accountability back to the business. So the business will define what they consider to be sensitive information and how that needs to be classified. And when you do that, it means that you can enable things like user-driven classification and suggested classification. So a user can create content. It might contain PCI information, PII information. It might have information that's sensitive to your organization. And when the user triggers an action such as saving a document or sending a document in a message, you can suggest what the classification level should be, based on the information that's contained in it. So when you're thinking about how to implement classification, you think about whether it's going to be user-driven, whether it's going to be suggested, and how you can actually involve the business and the business units in being able to define what information is sensitive. So what are some of the benefits that organizations have from implementing a classification strategy? So I guess the main ones really is that classification in the early stages is used to educate users and educate the business about the sensitive nature of the information they're handling. If you can start off by doing something very simple, like bring up a visual marking that says to a user, the information contained in your document or contained in your email is sensitive, please handle it accordingly, then that really starts to reinforce the security policy and the messaging across the organization about how you want your users to handle information. So think of classification in the early days as being a way to educate users about security and how to handle information. And as the classification solution starts to mature in your organization, it can also be used to empower users, to allow them to select appropriate levels of classification. So you can introduce user-suggested classification. So, instead of just saying to users, hey, this document contains sensitive information, be careful with it, go one step further and say, we now suggest that you classify that information as restricted or confidential based on the information we're seeing, and you can allow the users to select those levels. So you can start to empower the users. And really, once the solution matures, you can then use it to actually start to enforce policy. So then we can use some blocking techniques to say, if a document is classified as restricted, we only want it to be printed on a particular printer, or we're not going to allow that information to be sent to external email recipients, for example. But the key message here is that start simple. So in the first instance, use classification as a way to educate your users by simply bringing up warning messages. Then allow them to select classification labels, so empower, and then think about enforcing. And as a very quick example of how we can do that, so in terms of education, we can bring up within Office documents, we can bring up the notification bar there, the Office notification bar that says, hey, this content contains things like PII information. In this case, we can see credit card numbers and names and addresses in there. So we can bring up notification bars to say, please handle this information accordingly. That would be the educate part. Then you can move on to empowering users to select the level of classification they want. Finally, you could have a policy that says, hey, you're trying to print this document, it contains classified information, we're only going to allow you to print it to this internal document that may be in a secure location within your organization. So those are some very quick examples of how you can step through that sort of that crawl, walk, run type strategy. And as we were saying, what we would always recommend is start simple. Start by just having very basic visual markings and labels on your data as a way to start to educate and reinforce that message across the organization. As the solution matures and as your users get used to classifying information and seeing visual markings on documents and watermarks, etc., then you can start to introduce some more sophisticated integration, like using your DLP to start reading those classification labels. So start basing policies on how the documents are tagged. Start integrating with backupping and archive solutions. So start integrating with your encryption gateways to read classification labels and make encryption decisions based on that. And then once you're actually mature within the organization, you have a very solid foundation for classification, then we can look at things like actionable intelligence. We can start looking at users' behavior. So we can start saying, well, if this user starts to downgrade 10 documents within 2 or 3 minutes within a certain time frame, then we can trigger different actions and different events. So you can start looking at some more sophisticated ways of leveraging those classification labels. But the key message is start simple and then let the solution mature across the organization. Actionable intelligence is very important for any solution that you put in place today. You need to be able to produce information that shows you whether your classification policies are effective and whether that education message is actually getting through. Are users actually classifying documents appropriately? Are users downgrading and upgrading classification a lot? Are users ignoring the user-suggested classification and sending documents around or sending emails anyway? Therefore, is the content appropriate for them to be handling? So make sure that there is a level of reporting with whatever solution for classification that you put in place. And finally, think about all those areas that we've talked about. Not only classification for Office documents, but also for messaging for Outlook as well. Think about your repositories where you're saving information. Do you have classification for SharePoint? Do you have classification for mobile? So when you're thinking about classification, you need to think about it in a very holistic way to make sure that there are no gaps really in your strategy. And finally, we have a very mature methodology for implementing classification across organizations. We work with some very large organizations, people like Intel, people like Dell, organizations that have 150, 200,000 users. We've worked with over a number of years to develop a very specific deployment methodology, and there is a methodology portal that we give our customers access to that has a whole heap of information that guides them through the whole process from pilot right through to production implementation. It talks about how to get the organization ready, how to get the business units and the users on board and engaged in the project, because ultimately that's what will make it successful. So, we can work with you as an organization to help you deliver value and deliver quick outcomes from your classification project. So with that, I'm now going to hand over to Mahesh from WebSense Raytheon, and Mahesh is going to talk about DLP and how DLP can help protect your organizations and form part of your data protection strategy. So with that, let me hand over to Mahesh.
Thank you, Simon, for the introduction. And I should say, so there were some great insights about how customers need to adopt a data classification framework. Okay, I'm all set, and I hope you're able to see the screen.
Yes, we can see that, Mahesh.
Great, thanks, Simon. Okay, so I think the presenters, Avinash and Simon, have already explained the importance of enforcing controls around data because of the way the enterprise and threat landscape have changed. I guess businesses are mandating IT and security organizations to make information available from anywhere and any device. And the biggest concern that IT and security organizations have to do that for businesses is because of the way their current security framework is, and they need to actually revisit their security framework and see what exactly needs to be done to have controls closer to data. So in the next slide, I'll actually talk about the various ways with which information can get leaked out and the strategy that organizations need to consider to protect these information from getting leaked. The first one is accidental information leak. Because of employees' ignorance, they're not aware that the information that they are sending or transferring is very sensitive for the organization and can bring a significant risk for them. So the strategy to address this particular leak type should be employee education. So you must be having a question like, how can I have awareness enforced as part of the DLP strategy? So DLP, one of the biggest benefits that I believe can bring to organizations is to enforce active awareness campaigns to educate users as and when they are about to do something which can bring a significant data loss risk for the organization. Say for instance, a user is trying to copy a sensitive document to a pen drive. The DLP systems can throw active campaigns, awareness campaigns, by displaying pop-ups for the user to provide a justification on why he needs to share this information, and also to inform him that the document has got sensitive content and he needs to handle that appropriately. The second leak type, which I think is becoming a big concern for the security organizations, is leaks because of end users' machines being compromised and hackers deploying an advanced threat or a malware on it. So actually, when we do deployments, we see at least 20 to 30% of incidents that appear in our product is because of end users' machines being compromised, and that is being used to send information out. Again, you should be wondering, how can DLP help to address this particular leak type? Yes, DLP can detect information going out and block it, but what it also can do is perform something called data theft prevention. So data theft prevention is a subset of data loss prevention, and it can help organizations to gain context that the information that is going out is actually because of a malware infection, so that they can detect that particular machine which is infected and perform appropriate remediation, other than just blocking that information going out. So I was just speaking to one of our labs researcher recently, and what he mentioned was 20% of zero-day threats that WebSense discovered over the last around broken business processes that exist in that organization. So I could actually quote so many instances that we see during deployments. So one of the instances that I think I should quote is the recent ones that I saw is one particular business function in that organization which is actually implementing projects for their customers. They were using Dropbox as their Dropbox for project management. Lots of critical information about their customers, the way they manage the projects, the operational efficiencies in executing those projects. All those metrics were uploaded to Dropbox, and they were not doing this for any malicious reason. They were actually doing this to get the business done. But IT and security organizations were not aware of this. Secondly, the information that they were sharing, if their customers get to know about it, it could have created a significant financial and reputational damage for this particular organization. So DLP helps organizations to gain visibility of various broken business processes that exist, and so that the IT and security organizations can have discussions with business and understand what needs to be done to reduce the risk because of these business processes. And lastly is the malicious insider, where we call that as insider threat. So I think insider threat is a reality. I mean, probably if organizations think that it cannot happen to them, we have seen significant amount of data breaches that have been reported because of an insider threat, where the classic example would be employees before they are leaving, they tend to take information with them which can help them to complete their, which can help or provide value in their next jobs. So to address this particular leak type, I think DLP or DTP can help organizations to profile user behavior and identify if a user deviates from normal behavior to a suspicious behavior, and start monitoring them more and understand what are the information that they're accessing, and also decide what controls needs to be enforced to protect these insiders from taking critical information out. So the reason why I thought I should mention this is because mostly when organizations look at deploying DLP, they really do not know how to break down incidents and what strategy should be they're considering to mitigate each of the incident type that's appearing in the DLP tool. So it's very important when organizations evaluate a DLP tool to check whether the DLP tool provides enough context to understand, for the incident manager to understand why exactly the information or the incident that is appearing is appearing. Is it because of accidental intentional loss? Is it because of a malware infection or a broken business process? Or if there is actually a malicious insider who's trying to steal information? And that's what I think is explained in the slide. Most DLP solutions do this. Imagine, when you see this picture, you could actually see that there's a funny guy who's running amongst athletes. Yes, you can get some actionable intelligence out of it to check why is this guy running amongst athletes, which is what I think most DLP solutions do. They would be able to tell you that there is a content which probably is critical for you is going on. But one of the significant advantages that a DLP solution can also provide, or when you're considering to choose a DLP solution that you need to look at, is to check what context is it providing. Imagine the same picture if it tells you that the guy is actually running because there are cops following him. Then it gives you enough context to see that this incident is a high priority incident, and appropriate investigation needs to be done on why that content is actually going out. And that's why I said WebSense DLP solutions not just tells you that probably a credit card information is going out, it can also tell you why exactly that information is going out, so that you can derive appropriate context out of it and enforce or decide the right remediation technique. So some of the key capabilities that WebSense DLP solutions offer to our customers is mentioned here. Before I move on to each of this, I would like to mention that WebSense comprehensively addresses organizations' data loss prevention requirements to protect data at rest, in use, and also in motion for all possible channels with which information can get leaked out, including mobiles. But I just thought I should just highlight some of the key functionalities, which is a differentiator for us, which also provides enough context for an administrator to decide why the incident is appearing, are mentioned here. The first one is the DRIP DLP. So only WebSense as on date offers this functionality. So what we mean by drip DLP is to detect information leaks in low volumes. Most organizations, like say, let me give an example. If you want to be PCI compliant, you of course would be using DLP to protect credit card information, but no organization would be having a policy to log if one credit card number gets leaked out. And the reason why they don't have this policy is because one, it can result in a lot of privacy issues. It can also create a lot of uninteresting incidents and making DLP really unmanageable. So they decide a threshold based on their risk appetite. Normally it's like 3 or 5. As I said, it's based on the risk appetite of the organization. If more than 3 credit card numbers go out, probably log. If more than 5 goes out, block. So organizations define such policies. And malware authors know about it. So they know that if an organization is having a DLP technology, I mean, probably would be having a DLP technology and they are protecting credit cards. So what they do when they code the malware is to make the malware send one credit card number every second, so that the DLP system becomes blind to it, but at the end of an hour, probably the hacker gets a significant amount of credit card details which he can use for whatever intent that he's stealing that credit card information. So to address this concern, WebSense has a unique way to protect low and slow data leaks, where we allow administrators to define rules which states from the same source, if more than X credit card numbers get leaked out in Y time period, X and Y are variables, they do not allow that source to send any more credit card details, and also log what all credit card information has already gone up. So this capability, we believe, would significantly prevent malware stealing information, because typically malwares try to steal information in low volumes, and also intelligent users who are trying to evade DLP systems. The second control or capability that we offer is to detect information that gets embedded in an image. Most DLP systems are blind to images, and malware authors again know about this, and some of the intelligent users also know about it. So what they try to do is, instead of sending the original Excel file, which probably has credit card numbers, what they try to do is like convert that file to an image by taking a snapshot, or by using tools to convert files into images, and send that image so that they can successfully evade DLP systems. So WebSense is one of the very few DLP solutions, which offers capabilities to extract content obfuscated within even image files. And some of our customers are already using this extensively and have seen significant benefits out of this functionality. The third one, which is data identification, and I thought I should show that with a snapshot. So when organizations go through a DLP journey, they actually find it really tough to identify which all information they need to protect, because it takes its own time to engage with business, understand critical information assets that they need to protect. If they already have a classification framework, if they already use TITUS, it's great. DLP can extract that information from a classification framework that organization is using. But if it's not that case, then WebSense offers over 1,000+ predefined policy templates, which are industry and geography specific. So what an organization, what the administrator of the organization needs to do is to choose the geography or geographies where they have presence and the industry vertical they belong to, and automatically policies that apply to that geography and industry vertical gets turned on. And there's an example that's just mentioned here, where not just structured data like PCI, we also can look for source codes, strategic documents like merger and acquisition, price list, financial information, etc. There is a huge team that works at the back end to provide these templates or classifiers as part of our solution. So organizations can leverage this to classify information real time as that processed through our solution offerings. So this we believe will help organizations to deploy DLPs easily. And some of our customers actually leverage this functionality and started deriving benefits or demonstrate returns to businesses even within the first few months of deployment. The next part I also would present about, this snapshot actually talks about the risky user behavior classifiers that we have as part of our solution offering. The snapshot here mentions the classifiers that we have to detect data thefts. So you could see some classifiers like password information going out, information going with encrypted files going out, suspicious behavior over time, and several other classifiers, which helps administrators to gain context that the information that is going out is actually because of a malware that is residing in that machine, which is trying to probably encrypt information, steal credentials, or send information in low volumes over a period of time. So all these classifiers are already built in, which organizations can just turn on to gain this context on whether the information that is going out is actually because of a malware or it's a user-driven behavior. Not just that, we also are providing classifiers to detect indicators of compromise, suspicious user activity. So if you see the same user trying to send a lot of information during unusual working hours, or if he's trying to send lots of emails to himself, lots of emails from official email ID to his own webmail ID. So we already have, or if information is going to competitor domains, we have classifiers that are available natively within the solution, which helps administrators to gain context that the incident that is appearing is actually because of a suspicious user behavior. And there's a lot of R&D investment that's gone on developing these classifiers, and WebSense will continue to provide more and more classifiers to detect behavioral analytics or to detect suspicious behavior. And we believe this unique capability that we offer as part of our DLP offering would help customers to address insider threats effectively. The policy framework that we provide as part of our solution offering is both content and context aware, as I mentioned earlier, and it's very easy to translate business requirements into effective policy statements, because mostly when you approach business to understand how they want to protect the data, they're going to just say exactly the way it's mentioned in our policy framework. I mean, they probably would be saying where the information is ideally supposed to reside, which are the channels with which it's authorized to move out. Probably it's only corporate email. Which are the recipients who are authorized to receive it. So all those details are going to be given by business, and you can translate those requirements into effective policy statements through the tool. And another important aspect that I thought I should mention here is, even if organizations do not know what to protect, since our policy framework also revolves around who, where, and how. I mean, we have seen some of our customers deploying DLP policies in block mode even from day one, because they know that they do not want any sensitive information, or they do not want any information to go to social media. They do not want any information probably to go to a malware infected site, to a specific geo destination. They do not want peer-to-peer as a protocol or a channel to transmit information. So even if organizations struggle to know what needs to be protected, still they can have policies deployed based on who, where, and how, and start demonstrating value to businesses by addressing data loss risks. And on action, you could see that we just don't monitor or block. There are also inbuilt incident management and remediation workflows available here. Like say, for instance, we can automatically detect critical information and ensure that it's encrypted before it gets copied to remote media natively. We also can work with our partners like TITUS, and if a user forgets to classify critical content, maybe intentionally or unintentionally, since DLP is content aware, it can detect that content and quarantine that email or the document and send a notification to the user saying that he is only allowed to share this information after enforcing an appropriate classification template onto it. So such native incident management and remediation workflows are available within the tool. And when it comes to incident management and remediation, since DLP is a business tool and it revolves around businesses, it also is important for businesses to manage incidents. Like say, for instance, if information goes from a marketing department, IT or security probably would not be able to derive context out of the incident by just looking at the information that is going out. I mean, by just knowing that there is a marketing information going out. So they probably want the marketing person to tell the nature of the incident to them so that they can take appropriate action to it. So WebSense DLP allows this. So different incidents can be delegated to different incident managers. regulatory data can go to a compliance team, like financial information can go to financial team. So all that is natively done, and organizations can delegate administration and management of incidents based on the line of business and the nature of the incident. So since non-technical personnel also has to manage incidents, it's going to be extremely tough for the IT and security teams to go and train the non-technical business folks on the DLP technology to manage incidents. So we have anticipated this, and we also have listened to customers' requirement earlier, and now we provide, not just now, for the last year or so, we provide our incident management and remediation workflow, which is completely email based. So whatever options that we provide in the UI to manage incidents is natively available within the tool, and we allow the incident managers to take appropriate action, like the way it's mentioned in the slide, on email itself, which means incidents can be managed from anywhere and any device without training business on the DLP technology. So lastly, I would just like to mention, as I said earlier, DLP can also address data at rest requirements. It can go and perform discovery of various data stores to check, to give an information inventory of where all critical information is residing. It can also execute remediation actions by integrating with classification solutions like TITUS. We natively integrate with them to ensure that unclassified critical information is automatically classified. We also can integrate with encryption solutions, IRM solutions natively, and provide comprehensive workflows to go and protect critical information residing in various data stores that organizations have. And this also applies to cloud repositories like Exchange Online or SharePoint Online. With that, I would like to hand over to Avinash, who would probably quickly give you an overview in terms of case studies and how TITUS and WebSense DLP solutions can integrate and the benefits customers can get because of that. Over to you, Avinash.
So I guess you guys can see my screen. So the idea behind the next quick 5 minutes is to give you a bit of an overview about what kind of integration level work is done and how it benefits. So if you just look at how this particular the particular graphic is talking about is a simple user. So if somebody is ideally looking at something like a TITUS user, they are just trying to compose an email, send it, saving it, sending it out. They're labeling it in the right way. Now, if there's a policy violation, this auto remediation policy can be sent to the user directly as well. Based on the metadata being forwarded upon correction, then the DLP solution can take a policy decision on what it needs to do, and all of this is covered under an audit trail. Now, very simply put, the emphasis on devising, if you remember when I started the talk, I had spoken about, particularly talking about, what kind of integration is necessary, and that each of these solutions cannot work as an island or in silos of their own. So the integration we're talking about here has two primary benefits. One, if you only have like a DLP solution in place as of today, what happens is there is a load on the DLP agent or the tool itself to scan through or do a quick run through of the email or the document to understand what is the kind of handling procedure which is associated with it. With a classification solution like TITUS in place, TITUS embeds its own metadata into emails and documents which can be read by a DLP tool like WebSense. So WebSense does not have to go through the contents of the document. It can just look at the metadata header or the metadata classification label to understand what it needs to be doing as an action. A very simple example, you might have allowed USB on the laptops in your company. Now, but you might want to block, say, a sensitive kind of an information from going out of your company. So now, what typically happens is your endpoint DLP will then have to go through the document, understand why it's sensitive, and then block. In this case, all it has to do is read the metadata header of the document. If it is anything other than, say, secret, it should allow the USB copy. If the metadata is secret, it will block. As simple as that. Second thing is from an incident management perspective. If you see, having a DLP solution or any other kind of solution only will, let the incident happen, and either an allow will happen or a block will happen. With a solution like classification, like TITUS at the endpoint level, what will happen is that the user gets the option to auto remediate whenever, for whatever reason, the violation has happened. So if it's an email marked internal and I have an external domain recipient on it, I will then warn the user, and the user can automatically remove the recipient and send the email. So the overhead on either the agent or the security operations team or the device management team is significantly reduced. So a tight correlation between a classification solution and a DLP solution goes a long way in ensuring that your information is distributed, but distributed only to the intended set. Hence, an integrated ecosystem will work. A quick approach on how Palladium looks at implementing a DLP solution. You identify the information. Once the installation happens, you create an incident management workflow. You let it be in a monitoring mode for some time by doing, the data discovery. Once you understand what is the typical kind of, traffic within my organization, then I will see what policies need to be moved to block, and I will block them. And then I'll do an integration. Palladium also does, awareness and training sessions for people within the organization. And if there is a significant device management or security operations overhead, then Palladium will help you, monitor and manage the solution as well. Likewise, for classification, it's a simple benchmark implementation and train approach. This is pretty much self-evident. From a case study perspective, I would just like to, the DLP, I'm sure there are so many cases, the classification, there are so many cases. This is Palladium's strong point in terms of an integration case study, wherein firstly, there's no data classification policy in place. Information is scattered. No enforcement on webmail, like how Mahesh mentioned a while back. A lot of people sending email from their machines to their webmail where they can access and take information out. And the biggest challenge here is customer had a notion that semantic DLP has not been integrated to the fullest, and something further can be done in this context. So Palladium services was end-to-end procurement of the latest classification suite at that point of time, integration with SharePoint, integration with OA, and integration, an integrated point for policy creation and enforcement. So with this, the customer was significantly able to see benefits in terms of the semantic DLP, reading the metadata, a significantly reduced response time for his, if in the case of any incidents happening, allowing users to auto-remediate, and many other benefits in terms of turnaround time and reduction in agent overhead. So this is a nutshell about an isolated DLP operations and management implementation, from a classification implementation, but from an integration point of view, not just between them, but with other ecosystem components like SIEM as well. So that's about it from my end. I would like to open the floor for Q&A now.
You can type your questions on the chat window.
Okay, so we've had a couple of questions come in. So the first one is, does TITUS support Office 365 and the DLP part of it? So the question about Office 365 really can be broken down into a couple of areas. So for most enterprise organizations that are adopting 365 today, it's really a subscription model change. So we're seeing them moving from end user license agreements to 365 subscription model, but they are continuing to use the desktop client. So they're using Outlook and Office and all those functions in the same way as they do today. So if it's simply moving the subscription model, then yes, TITUS will work with the desktop plugins for Office and Outlook as we do today. However, as Microsoft mature Office 365, more organizations will want to move to the full-blown web-based applications. And there we are fully committed to supporting those web-based applications for Office 365. However, we are somewhat dependent, as all vendors are, on Microsoft releasing the hooks and what they're terming the modern add-ins to Office 365, which will allow vendors like TITUS and all the other security vendors to put actions in there when a user, for example, uses the web-based version of Outlook. When they click on send to send an email, TITUS needs to be able to trigger a policy, and in order for us to do that, we need Microsoft to release those APIs. So Microsoft at the moment, because we're a Microsoft development partner, and they are committed to release that code in December this year, and we already have part of the product ready to go for Office 365. So at some point early next year, once we've built that functionality into the product, we will absolutely support the web-based version of Office 365. So that's a very long-winded answer to the question.
Yeah, and from the DLP aspect of it, so we already extend controls to protect information on Office 365. So like the way I said earlier, websins would be able to discover critical information residing in O365, be it SharePoint Online, and we also would be supporting OneDrive by end of this month. Secondly, we are planning to come out with a cloud-based DLP, which again is going to be available by end of this month, where the customer can have our DLP image in Azure Cloud, and they also can buy this from Azure Marketplace. And so all outbound emails from O365 would be inspected in Azure Cloud on cloud. However, the management and reporting would be on-premise. So and the policies would be enforced to this platform on cloud, and incidents would be imported to the on-prem management console to manage and remediate incidents. So we completely address data protection requirements of customers, even if they are planning or if they already have embraced O365.
Yeah, there seems to be a second question that WebSense and TITUS work independently, and as such there is no integration in the two software. So I'll take this. So there is integration between the software. If you recollect my integration slide, what happens is with an email or with a document, when it is classified, TITUS writes certain metadata into the document properties, and you have something called adapters within TITUS, which will enable any particular DLP to read that metadata and take actions. Reverting to the earlier example, if you want to situationally block, for example, USB within your organization only for sensitive documents, your endpoint DLP will be able to read the metadata in the document and then take an action item if the document is sensitive to block USB, else allow USB. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I would like to add to that, Avinash. We tightly integrate actually with TITUS, and one of the use cases Avinash has already mentioned. So most classification solutions append actually metadata to documents, but it's become tough for DLP solutions in some scenarios to extract that metadata and enforce policy. Because of the tight integration that we have with TITUS, we understand the metadata absolutely and enforce policies based on the unique value that we see as part of the metadata. Secondly, WebSense, like the way I said, can also go and perform discovery of content at various repository stores, and we already have a remediation script built which natively integrates with TITUS. And if you see any content, like say for instance, if you go and see an internal content which is not classified, we automatically would trigger the script which will make TITUS to go and classify this document natively. So there is some tight integration, and we have some customers, joint customers, who are actually realizing the benefit because of the way we integrate with TITUS. Okay. So there's one more question, which is which DLP policy we must create in WebSense to detect metadata tag or label. So there is already a classifier to look for specific keywords in metadata of email or files, and you just have to just look for those classifiers and add that unique value that appears in the metadata. There's another question which is how many minimum user need to be implemented for DLP? I'm actually not sure what's the intent of the question. It actually boils down to, I would say, what are the critical information assets that an organization has, which all users have this critical information. Are there any avenues for every user in the organization to access that information and send it out, which in most cases is yes. So I would say it probably makes sense to deploy DLP not just for users who have access to sensitive information, but at least for channels like email or web, from 1,000 users to about 400,000 users, even in Asia Pacific as a region.
So to build on what Mahesh said, users definitely is one criteria from a sizing perspective, but if you are looking at DLP or this data protection strategy, the first question you need to ask yourself is, what is my critical information and where is it there, and to whom all it is accessible? That should help you answer this question yourself, though it is an important thing from a sizing perspective, but it is largely to do with what your strategy is and then work backwards into how many users you might want to do it for. Questions, you can feel free to reach out to any one of us or Palladian marketing team. Okay, there seems to be something coming up. BYOD with enterprise email accessing capability as per allowed policy of companies. Using this solution, can we restrict particular emails to open from an unauthorized network or public IP? So this can be addressed at multiple levels with a combination of the solutions. One thing I can think of at the top of my head is A, for your purposes of OVA, there is a TITUS component like Simon mentioned on which you can enforce certain policies. Now, based on certain features, whether it is being tested within the network or outside a particular network, you can have a particular policy from a client.
Okay, I think we lost Avinash. To just continue to what he was just saying, I think it's at least with TITUS and our offering, it's not going to be possible to restrict access to specific emails based on the IP from where the user is initiating a request, but this can be addressed through other technical controls that I can think of. Okay, so there's another question which says, is DLP at the endpoints sufficient? So again, depends on the volumes and the requirements of the organization and the use cases that organization typically would like to address. So one of the things that we recommend organizations is to focus on high-risk channels with which information can get leaked out, which predominantly are email, web, and laptop users. So so we recommend to at least start from there. One of the biggest benefits that an organization can achieve when they roll out network DLP in phase 1 is to learn or to fine-tune policies effectively and then roll out those policies on endpoints. This approach will help organizations to avoid a lot of changes on policies, especially around endpoints if the volume is huge. So this, we believe, will help organizations not to have any operational or performance overheads at the beginning on endpoints. And once they have the policy, which is really mature and it's fine-tuned to only detect true incidents, then organizations can start considering deploying endpoint-based DLPs to protect data leaks from endpoints. However, as I said, laptops is another significant channel which information can get leaked out, especially when the laptop is outside the organization. And for those specific use cases, DLP needs to be deployed, and we can recommend policies which will effectively enforce data loss policies for those roaming users or laptop users. I hope I answered your question. I think if there are no more questions, we probably should end the webinar. We would like to thank you for the patience and asking some wonderful questions to all of us. I also would like to thank Simon and Avinash for wonderful insights that they've provided during the webinar. So again, once again, thank you. And if there are any questions, please feel free to reach out to us.